live show number 145. With me is the statuesque, picturesque, static picture of our special guest co-host today, Mr. Griffin Sandberg. 45 with me let me hit the mute on the other one so I don't sound like I'm an echo. Who is our special guest host from Screen Pilot, and I think he brought an entourage with him somewhere, but I think he'll be joining us. And Mr. Robert Cole will be joining us shortly here in the room as well. With us, we have a fun list of stuff to talk about, but before we even get to those kind of things, we have the privilege, hopefully, of Mr. Griffin joining us. Mr. Griffin, up on the top of the screen, you'll find two buttons. One, it looks like a camera icon, and the other one looks like a microphone icon. You'll need to turn both of those on. Do not hit the screen, the pencil, or the phone.
Oh, here we go.
There we are, live in...
We're a tech company.
Hey, what's this with the brick wall? Is this live from San Quentin? Is this live from San Quentin?
Coming in, yeah, we got Johnny Cash in the back.
Johnny Cash in the back. Sir, Ring of Fire. Mr. Robert Cole, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Oh, you sound so calm and placid, at peace with the universe.
I'm tired.
You've been moderating. Well, I can empathize with that.
I've had a long week.
Yeah. Well, we have as always we have co-hosts that come join us on our live show. Mr. Ed should be joining us eventually. I didn't think he gave any indication that he was not joining us today.
Oh no, he did. He said Ed and Stuart will not be joining us.
What?
Oh,
what?
Well, there are two very good reasons. I believe Stuart is just so emotionally invested in the royal wedding.
Oh.
I don't think he's able to. I don't think he's able to function.
I do have to say we have another another one for across the room, for across the pond in the room right now. Though we have Tom Dibble here. He's actually going to be jumping in. Honestly, my role today is going to be like the questions of the Prime Minister. I'm going to be feeding the answers, but Tom's going to be jumping in with some topics here. But
okay.
Well,
that's number one. And Ed is still. My understanding, he's listening to a file and he can't figure out if it's saying Laurel or Yanni, and it's driving him crazy, and he can't function. So
okay, now I know that's not true because Ed would listen to it and say it says Ed. That's
right. Ed is God. Ed is God. Ed is God. That's all I hear.
Yeah, Ed would just be like, no, that says Ed. That's Ed. Yeah, that's all I hear.
Definitely heard Ed.
Yeah, I definitely heard Ed. There's no other name to it in that sense. Yeah. Well, besides, yes, we do have the word wedding coming, but no, I can see why you're very tired, Mr. Robert, because you are moderating. I crashed and burned on my long flight. I was up for 36 hours when I came back from Vancouver, and I just died on Wednesday.
Wait, 30? You had a 36-hour flight from Vancouver? Now, what new low-cost carrier is this, Lauren?
It was really affordable. As long as we paddled, the plane stayed in the air. No, it was just between driving from Vancouver to Seattle taking the red eye, but that whole day was speaking and all that stuff with HSMAI. And then doing the connection between Dallas, which was only 40 minutes, and then flying. It just, at the end of it all, was 36 hours up. And I got home and I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll go to work. Plunk. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Anyway, we do want to take full advantage of the fact that we have Mr. Griffin and team with us today from Screen Pilot, which means that we're going to go over and chase him down with tons of questions and so forth. But to get started, Mr. Griffin, please, a little bit about yourself, company-wide, and all that kind of fun stuff, so there's some context to our conversation.
Absolutely. So, coming in here from Denver, Colorado, live from Denver. It's Friday morning. I'm tired. We have Tom Dibble here, who's the founder and CEO. We actually started the company out in Charlotte, North Carolina, about 11 and a half years ago now. Been in Denver for about 7 or 8 now. And we're a full-service digital marketing and web development firm for independent hotels. And we work with portfolios like Benchmark, Graduate Hotels, Two Roads Hospitality, some real great names in the space. We're right down the road from Two Roads, which has been fantastic. But yet we've been in this space for that long now, for about coming up on 12 years now at this point. And we're definitely going to stay in because, I've been preaching to the choir. There's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of newcomers and a lot of new challenges every single day. So.
True.
I follow this. Honestly, thank you guys for including us here. I follow this live stream every week, and it's a great rapport that you all have and some really awesome stuff you chat about. So we're pleased to be here.
Well, we appreciate raising the bar for us today. appreciate for raising the bar today. So crazy thing, where did the name Screen Pilot actually come from? Because obviously there's synonyms as to why people pick their companies, but why did Screen Pilot? Where did the origin of the name come from?
Sure. So Screen Pilot is, you have the what we call a trailer across the pond for a movie or anything. You have that 30 seconds to capture someone's attention, and that's what we think the same thing is in digital marketing. It's capturing their attention from the start, but it's also following that person throughout their entire guest journey as well, and having that personalized messaging. But the first shot that you have is that first 30 seconds in reel and probably 4 seconds on the website. So that's where we're trying to capture that attention.
Makes sense. I had the weird audacity to work with a company called Standing Dog for a while before it got absorbed by W Promote.
Heard Mike Wiley. Those guys, yeah.
Yeah, and he never had a great story for it. He was basically hunting for a domain name and couldn't find one that was open. And then he turns around, his dog is literally standing beside him. And he's like, Standing Dog, and just looked at it, and the domain was available. I'm like, dude, you got to come up with a better story. Like, you're on some sort of vision quest. You had your beads. You're in the middle of the mountain.
Ayahuasca, yeah. Honestly, it's the first time I've been asked in a while, so I'm glad I had a story.
Exactly.
At least there's meaning to it, rather than, oh, I was drunk at a bar and name popped in my head, and I thought, what the hell?
And 90 days from now, if you ask the same question, they're going to have a very well architected story that is impactful.
Yeah. So, okay, you deal with independent hotels. Why the choice between it and not playing with the brand field and so forth? What made you go towards the independent side, obviously?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a question that we ask ourselves all the time if we're going to, expand in that space. And I will say there are some larger brands that we work with here and there, really because we have a great relationship with ownership there. That makes everyone's life a lot easier, streamlines a lot of processes. But end of day, it's there's a part of selfishness on our side that we want to keep the right kind of staff on hand for years. And if we're kind of trying to cut through red tape all day, every day in and out, it's going to have people kind of have this be this churn and burn type of revolving door type of aspect. So we really, really love having these independent hoteliers that we can get on a call every week with the GM, the DOSM, the director of revenue, the DOSM, just everybody, and be able to say, here's the ideas, what we want to test out the next month. Can we get the go ahead? We get the go ahead. We come back a month later with stats. We come back 3 months later with stats, and just really able to be creative. So
very cool. How many do you have on your team so far?
On our team?
Yeah,
we have 29 at this point. So boutique in what we work with, and boutique and kind of what our setup is as well. It's all 29 people here in Denver.
Oh, that's nice. That is nice. Are you a Star Trek fan at all?
I'm not. Tom, Star Trek?
Maybe.
Never get larger. Never get larger. Never get out of the captain's chair, because that is a sweet spot of size. That 29 to 40 is, because then when you get beyond that, you start dealing with infrastructure things and blah blah. But when you're below the 40 mark, man, you guys can turn on a dime. You can have great thinking conversations without layers of. It's a sweet spot. I'm jealous of that, because that's a very cool space to be in.
Oh, I'm fully aware of how lucky we are right now. I come from the tech startup background where it's, you're 8 people one day, 80 the next, 800 the next, and then out of business the next. So
almost as fast as you said it.
A slow scaling mentality, and you can turn on a dime, and it's
nice.
Great. I don't see us being above 40 in the next 5 years, probably, just because it's the right fit right now, the right niche and right size.
It sounds, having my heart into what you're saying is like the fact that you talk, collaborate, deliberate, communicate. I mean, I don't know what other word to throw at it, but that engagement that you're talking about, that's the magic part. I mean, when I think companies get to where they're regulating the conversations, downplaying the processes to lesser minions to do basic work, and everything you just said in your description was like, no, we talk, we engage, we're excited about trying. I mean, that creative thing is the thing that gets lost when the companies start getting into that monetization model, and it doesn't sound like you're anywhere near that thought process.
Absolutely. Yeah, we don't want to be lost in operations and putting the carriage ahead of the horse. As you all know, this is a very, very tight-knit community. So it's a blessing and a curse. And I think if you drop the ball, people know. But if you do right by property, the word spreads that way too. So
sure.
Definitely. A big part of the conversation for us is just the long term. So
I know I'm grilling you about the size you come, but it's just fascinating because I never had a chance to really ask these questions ahead of time. So it's kind of cool. I get to ask them now about what you guys are thinking about looking, because I know we have topically some things we want to talk about, which is really cool, but just the idea of understanding your company and what it does and so forth. So you best of breed stuff. You walk in the door and you.
This is a live recording. That is the fire department. Yeah.
Like, wow, the police are really coming for Robert. No. Robert, they finally caught up with that last alias you had.
Exactly. The witness protection program is not what it's cracked up.
Not what it
used to be. FBI's running a little thin today.
Well, that's right.
So you basically walk in, and I'm making stuff up, and you correct me wherever. You walk into a potential new client, and you're basically understanding what they're needing to do, and you're bringing whatever resources and whatever flavors and whatever softwares that you think are applicable into that conversation. Is that how you approach them?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely highly customized in that aspect. It's and that's something that if I'm talking to a new property and the conversation goes right to, what are the 2 package options, it kind of puts up a red flag for us as well. We don't want to be that kind of copy and paste type of solution. That digital marketing can be a lot of set it and forget it, and for certain properties that works. I think that's part of the kind of topic we're getting into today is channel distribution and what's doing right by the certain property that you're working with, and it definitely varies.
I did want to share
a tight niche that we're within, but if we're going in there, it's going to be a long, ongoing conversation to figure out what that scope of work is and what the true fit is.
Yes, I agree. And to that end, I wanted to bring up to something that always amazes me when I do the HSMA Rocket presentations. I speak with a woman, Bonnie Buckheiser. She does revenue management, phenomenal and brilliant woman. And she'll ask the group, what is your most profitable channel? No one answers. And it's mind-blowing that a hotelier would not know where their greatest source of revenue by channel would be. And then I ask a question when I'm up, it's like, what is your direct channel contribution? And again, blank stares. They don't know the percentages. It's like, how can you know what you're supposed to get from a channel if you don't even know what's contributing at that point? So I love the fact you want to talk about channel distribution, channel shift, and so forth, because I think it's an unknown aspect of conversation for a lot of hotels. I know from clients I talk to is like it's an education process, teaching them and understanding their channel mix, their channel distribution, what they're pursuing on channels, and what their yield is on channels. So I'm totally stoked that you wanted to bring that to the table and talk about it today.
Absolutely. So, and before we get into that, shout out to Ed. I know Ed's over there with that recording, and he's still hearing Ed, but so hear it again because I'd love to give him a shout out. We've had really good conversations with the Flip 2 team in the past, and really understand where they fit into the play, into the piece of the pie, and do right by all the properties they work with. Fuel Travel as well; those guys are awesome. So
yes, Stuart and his team do a really good job.
Good people on the call to be able to have an honest conversation about with.
Oh, and by the way, since they're not here, just so you know, as a rule of decorum, we get to abuse them. Talk bad about them.
I take everything I said.
You can make up. Yeah, the policy is you can make up whatever you like. Anything.
Yeah, anything you want about them, because they're not here to defend themselves. So, and Ed not having told me that he was not going to be here after being generous and connecting the dots with you, only means there's even more amplification of abuse. So, any derogatory comments that we can make, any slights and slants on him, then it's open season for us unless he wants to show up and defend his honor.
Great guy keeping on politics, and then oh my God, yeah, that guy's really on the wrong side, right?
And Stuart, those guys in Myrtle Beach, what are they? They're waking up from a drunken stupor from last night? I mean, what the hell's going on with that? I don't even know if their clients get in contact with them on Fridays. I think Friday's a busy day. You know what I mean?
They're recording their podcast. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, they're drinking beer already. Anyway.
Actually, I used to live in Charleston, and I do think Biker Week is right we might be in the midst of it, so Stuart might be out there in the chaps and riding around with a few. So I don't know.
It might just be chaps. I mean, Stuart's
out of town.
Now, wait a second. Don't tell Lauren that, because Lauren's going to go get on his chaps and jump on his bike and start heading there.
Head out
immediately. It's this weekend. Oh my God, I'm missing it.
Gotta
go. Bye-bye. All right.
It's anyway. They'd come down to Charleston afterwards, and that was usually vacation time for a lot of other people.
Sure. I mean, you can't get much else done with all that coming around. But yes, of course. All right. So from a channel distribution side, where would you like one to put a stick in the sand and start the conversation with us?
Sure. So I think part of it, I know Tom's definitely going to jump in at a certain point. I think for channel distribution, it's just kind of having that understanding. And I think one thing that comes up for us a lot when we're going in and really understanding what that distribution looks like for a new property is that there's kind of a lot of new lessons that need to be taught sometimes on where revenue is really going, whether it's an attribution model that we're having to redescribe, or it's understanding these kind of CPA models that are everywhere. They're left and right in the space now. I understand where they're coming from, right? As a method of growing your business, you understand that a lot of times, a lot of people on property are going to be more worried about the group space and the sales side of things than they are the marketing side. If you can come in and say, hey, you don't have to go to ownership and ask for more money right now for media spend, you're only going to pay when we acquire a new guest for you. It's, there's no questions asked at that point, right? But I think an issue that we've seen is that so many people are coming in with that model. At the end of the day, there's times now where we're almost saying, hey, you know what? I never thought we'd say this, but the OTAs are actually working out better for you. Yeah. You're paying 20% here, you're paying 15% there, 25% there of the booking. What are you keeping at the end of the day? And so it's definitely a conversation that is tough to have sometimes with properties because they've been able to have this really what they think is the silver bullet. But then we really look at what that distribution is looking like and where the cuts are being taken. And have to say, hey, let's take a step back. There are a few people that might be selling snake oil out there as well. And it's a really difficult conversation. But why I wanted to bring it up here is just I know that everyone in this group is really honest about that. And I'd love to hear your guys' feedback on what you've been seeing, in the space, and if you kind of had the similar kind of view and what conversations look like with any properties that you might work with.
Well, first, I'll take a quick stab and just say that I completely agree with it, that people get into this complacency mode, that they feel mentally that they're only paying for what's being generated. And that is the complacency mode of OTAs as well, where in their mind, they're only paying percentage on commissions of attained business, but they don't realize the cost of acquisition, and that is so much higher than if they were to manage and monitor other channels where they were doing a CPC model or something where they can mitigate the cost of acquisition rather than just allowing it to happen through the commission model. I've been on a pulpit for a long time about this augmentation of direct channel and attribution strings, where these softwares that are meant to help with your direct channel really hijack the scenario, their session counts, and will take credit for stuff that isn't theirs simply because you're allowing them to be in your direct channel space, and they take attribution string and hijack the session into theirs and then charge you commission for that model. And you're thinking, this is great, this software is improving my direct channel conversion, when in fact, they're taking credit for business they didn't gen. They just jumped in the way just before they walked in the door for you. So
they got their pixel to fire. Yeah.
Yeah. And then from a whole nother data source of that, and I show this to people when I do presentations, they will go over and they say, here's a pixel, put it into your system, and it pulls all the data. They don't restrict the data that the pixel's firing from, including credit card information. I mean, they're through the entire e-com funnel as well, and there's no security to that. And all that data then gets shared by their affiliates as well, because I'll pull up a scan onto their site. It's like, do you know you have 43 current tracking things on your site? And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, because your data is being used by somebody you have a contract with, but they're selling the data to somebody else. Their pixel's firing through their pixel, and you don't even have control of the data you're pulling. So it is that complacency issue, I think, is the thing that I fight the most with. What you're talking about, that channel distribution laziness of, oh, hey, we're only paying on the commission, everything's fine. And they don't look at it as a budgeted model at all for that. So, yeah.
Well, and just to chime in, I moderated this, the Onyx, basically customer conference, they call it, Onyx Future Source Conference, and it's a great conference. I mean, really good high signal noise ratio, which is always something I look forward to. Not a lot of pay to play sponsorships where they're just kind of out there hawking product and things like that. But huge top, and Onyx, really fundamentally works in the commission payment space, right? So they're transitioning very aggressively into overall, much more of the payments area. But really, they had a panel on attribution costs and things like that. And Oral Mirror, was up there with Marriott, and Marriott triggered that 30% cut in their group commission rates, right, to intermediaries recently, which Hilton followed. I understand IHG is now rolled in, so that's now an industry standard. But yeah, they're basically, the basic point is, hey, these acquisition costs are escalating much faster than the rates. And so this is a problem that has to be addressed. It was funny. The Onyx people asked me to, kind of go. They set up the conference as being, honest discussions and, controversy. And let's figure this out. So I kind of got up there and said, well, here's my time to weigh in at the end of that, and basically rolled through on these attribution costs. Actually, you have to follow the money. And I rolled up the classic. If you're a hotel owner, hey, you're paying 3% to the management company. Now, are they doing anything to drive business, or are they just running? I don't know, but that's a cost, that comes out of every dollar, that comes in room revenue. Actually total revenue, but that goes out. Hey, here's the brand. The average, according to HVS, is 12%. Is that, driving the business? It better be. There better be a portion that the brand's generating. You layer in all the, okay, it goes through an OTA and argue if it's, low or high or whatever. Hey, that's 15% on top of that. And you start aggregating this all together and you start going, oh my gosh, we're at 30% already. And this is just kind of structural stuff going through the channel. Oh, you've got another couple percent, that gets paid to whoever, the credit card company. You're at a third of gross revenues there, or your gross room revenue. And that's not sustainable, let alone any of these other things that wound up firing where, they were on your website and some retargeting pixel fired and things like it. And who knows how it got channeled through the, funnel. I mean, you can get a lot of everything. Yeah. Or
I mean, it's.
Yeah, and my point is, the reason these hoteliers love paying commissions because it's not a budgeted expense, right? And that's, they're addicted to it because they don't have to go explain that. They don't have to go get the funding and go roll these things in. So that 33% is not even including, hey, we spent a bunch of money on marketing. We just did this big campaign and, threw a bunch of stuff out. And who knows if this person booked, didn't see it, wasn't exposed. But anyway, that's even more, right? So it's a problem. And the owners are footing the bill for a lot of stuff that has to, that does have to get sorted out. And I think there's going to be, a reckoning. There has to be. So.
Absolutely. I mean, there definitely has to be. And I think I completely get how it tacked on so fast and how this mentality took over. I get it. Yeah. If I were in the shoes of a DOSM and I was worried about the other side of the business and somebody came in with that silver bullet, I would go for it 10 times out of 10, right?
Yeah. No budget. Just try us. Just do this. It works.
Exactly.
Hey, look at these stats. And it's like, oh, gee, wow, we've never seen something that powerful. Let's do more. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I know I've Tom Dibble pacing around here. This is
no, I'm coming in.
Okay, yeah, he's coming in another screen. All right, here we go. We have space. Awesome. It's been an interesting conversation for sure, and I do see that there is starting to be some reckoning in that space as well, which is good to see. I'd like to see if there is being some more pushback from the hoteliers at this point as well. But it's always a really interesting conversation. I think there's just it's an overwhelming space to be in at this point, and I think it's easy for people to take advantage of that as well. But yeah. It's really understanding the true data and the true channel distribution that it comes down to. And a lot of times it seems like this silver bullet or this easy solution, but there's a way bigger picture that we like to have with, when it comes to conversation with our properties.
If I could ask, when you get first tackling a project with a client, new client, old client or something, but when you get into this conversation with them, how do you approach the project? I mean, are you looking first to define the channels, contributions? I mean, how do you tend to tackle the channel distribution questions that come up from this? Without giving away secret sauce. No secret sauce. Don't want to steal.
No, absolutely. I think one of the best examples in our space would be a perfect example for anyone out there that's trying to look into the digital marketing strategy and understand what this is looking like. View-through versus click-through conversions is honestly a big piece of the pie that we need to tackle right away with a lot of people. A lot of agencies will come in and say, first of all, the difference between the two would be view-through is someone has been on a page where your advertisement has shown up. click-through is someone who's actually definitely interacted with that ad and gone through to your site. A lot of times the tricky nature of view-through is that it could be below the fold on a web page that you're not even seeing this ad. But a lot of places will take that as an attribution model to say, this ad was still a view-through conversion, though. People did convert from this because they were on the website where your ad was, and they ended up on your website within a certain time period. For us, we see that. We report on view-through conversions only to the extent that it helps us get more granular on where people are possibly interacting with your advertisements. But when it comes down to what the true conversions are, it's click-through for us. So it's a big thing to tackle right from the start, where we have to come in and say, we had a property a couple months ago that started up and said, hey, we had 101 conversions from remarketing last month. And we go, that's amazing. Maybe you don't need our help. Like, what's going on? But then we said, hey, go to your agency and ask them how many were view through, how many were click through. 100 of the 101 were view through. Directly tying that right there. And it's a really hard conversation to have, to say, hey, next quarterly with ownership, you have to say, those 101 bookings we had, we're not really sure where they came from. We have to kind of go back and figure that out and almost start from ground zero at this point. So it's a really interesting aspect. But one of those things where you can see that the wool can be covered, pulled over people's eyes really easily. But it really takes that extra time to look into this data and know the true meaning of it. And that's, I'd say that's one takeaway that we'd have for anyone in conversation is definitely go back and look into that and get a more granular understanding of what your data is telling you.
Yeah, and it's so difficult because it's basically the collision of these compensation models with this multi-point inspiration decision-making process of this traveler's journey, right? Because what really inspired them to book that particular property, it could have been a blog post from somebody who knows where, right? And yes, they were on the OTA site, they were over, they saw a retargeting ad, they did all these sorts of things contributed. But maybe the linchpin was something that wasn't even, that they knew about, right? That somebody was just out there saying, hey, here's a terrific little ski spot or a terrific little, romantic getaway. And, who knew? So yeah, it's a very, very complicated thing to tie basically tie that attribution back to the structural compensation models for all these different entities.
Hi guys, it's Griffin. I changed accent and I had a quick shave. So
New Jersey.
I'm over here tagging back on some responses I'm getting off of Facebook, and I'm like, God dang, Griffin changed.
I'll be here for sound effects now. It'll be like Monty Python. Every time someone new comes in, I'll have the coconut shell. I'll be Oscar.
The office of Silly Walks, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he'll be the albatross from now on. So,
well, thank you. Thank you for jumping in.
No, that's fine. It's all about Griffin around here, so he's had his 25 minutes of fun.
That's right.
It. Yeah. he was camera eye candy at the beginning. He was just eye candy at the beginning, get the ladies into listening and watching, and now it's going to be the real.
I got a face for radio, please.
and that's why we have Lauren hosting the show every week.
That's right. That's my purpose in life. No, anyway.
We're going to tag in and out on stuff, but I just wanted to kind of jump in on the attribution thing. Yes. It's really complicated. It's really, really complicated. And unless you do this day in, day out, you don't really know what you're getting into when you're kind of signing into a commission model, for a network or whatever it is. And my key thing about this, and I think you guys kind of touched on it already, is the compound effect of what you're signing off on. So you pay 4% here, 14% here, another 10% here. Now the OTAs look very attractive in that kind of situation because they're a cheaper conversion channel. And to your point, Lauren, about what you said, it's like you're giving away all your data and you don't know what you're giving away, and it is everything. These scripts, script upon script from one network to another network, etc. You're literally it's the whole kimono you're giving away at that point.
Right? Yeah.
Which is fine if you know what it is, but as soon as you sign one network on a CPA basis, then you sign another network on a CPA basis, it's out of control. And And a lot of the time we get in there and go, okay, so what is your true cost of direct distribution? And people go, oh, we think it's this. And it's like, well, really it's not, because you've made commission payments out to these other 3 channels as well that are all going after the same conversion. So you're paying 100% of weighting to that conversion, and that's not fair and it's not right in the spirit of, sure, they may have, assisted in a conversion in some way, but it's probably not at the value of 100% of the commission.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, not worth the money that you're paying. I can't begin to tell you the frustration that some of these vendors give when I send back the script that we're going to load for them. That usually has just 4 points of data that are contractually related to them, saying these are the 4 points we're going to let you draw from. The reference, referral.
And they're like, whoa, wait a second, hang on.
Like, wait, well, it's like, no, that's what you're going to get. Well, no, we need you to put this script in. It's like, no, contractually you need these 4 points of data, and we're going to give you those 4 points of data for tracking. But that's it. You're not going to run through our entire funnel and grab all of our data for this. And also, I always get shy of when some of these platforms that they do go connect to your direct channel and they have no dashboard to control how they interact with your site. It's an all-on thing. If it moves towards the click-off button, if it's a pause of 7 seconds or whatever, it's being rendered and so forth. And it's like, no, we're going to put you on certain pages only. We're going to script control your launch of your plugin. It's only going to be on certain pages that we're going to designate. And they don't like that either. It's like, well, contractually, it's our site. We can do this whenever we want to. So it is, to your point, just mitigating what you're using them for so that they actually provide the value that they say they're providing when you're using them, kind of thing, in that circumstance in particular.
And I think an important piece of it from a month-end routine is the reconciliation of, the conversions that they are particularly looking for payout on. And because that can be a manual process and it can be a time-consuming process. But I think that is, if anybody listening is utilizing CPA-based kind of networks, make sure you're running through that reconciliation process. Because sometimes we see that there are negotiated rate bookings that occur that for attribution on, and it's like, whoa, I've already discounted this. Time out, people. So that's a negotiated rate, and you want me to, no, that's not okay. So just please reconcile is what my suggestion.
How did this wind up on my group booking page? Wait a second.
Right, exactly. And they're grabbing and snagging just about anything that's going through the funnel of it.
I just made up that last point, but I'm willing to bet there are more than one property where that's happening. Right? They've got some little, go to this, put in your code for maybe they set up as a promo code, maybe put as, who knows how they're triggering on for somebody with a negotiated group going on there, and those things are firing off like crazy, and the bill's just getting paid. Comes in and goes, hey, that's great. Yeah, they see, hey, they're up over last month. Fantastic. And well, bookings are up. Oh, how's it coinciding with the season? Yeah, it should be building because you're getting into a peak season now. So.
Well, and I think that's the type of conversations that we have and the type of relationships that we have with our clients is very collaborative, and we kind of we help people do due diligence on new propositions. A lot of the time it comes through us, and so we get to do the due diligence first before we kind of put it in front of a client if we think it might be relevant for them. But a lot of the times it's direct sales, and people are just signing off and like, great, I only pay on commissions. That sounds fantastic. So it's a very complicated world, but it's fun to do forensics on, but it's time consuming.
It is, and unfortunately, with a lot of the hoteliers, and actually, it was interesting coming out of this Onyx conference. A few of the really great commentary that I really appreciated were. Basically, people saying, to this group, which was comprised of both hoteliers, agencies, and some tech companies, advising the hotel, push back on your IT people. Don't just trust that, they're doing such and such. Understand how this stuff works, right? I mean, you don't have to, go do a code crawl with them and understand exactly to that level. But hey, you need to understand how this technology is functioning, be it your CRS, how it's interacting with your PMS. How are these things happening? How are your third parties really working so you can understand this underlying data flow? I had a woman speaking on GDPR, and she was like, don't just take it from your attorney. There's a lot of bad lawyering going on these things. Understand the key principles. And I think you're making the same point, between the agencies or these third-party providers, you've got to understand kind of the fundamental elements of what are the objectives, what have we hired them to do, how are they being compensated, and then most importantly, how is this data being dealt with, and is it is all of that lining up and doing the things that you need it to do the way you need it to do? Or look at Facebook. They had a little problem with Cambridge Analytica.
Tom, it's nice to know that there's for some obviously we talk with Stuart a lot and Ed and so forth, and we kind of have our own ecosystem where we feel vindicated that we are doing the right thing, that we're wearing the white armor kind of mentality. And it's nice to know that with meeting you all and talking that we're not alone in that conversation. I know for me it's very comforting when I walk in and talk to a potentially new client or something, that exposing what they should be looking at, seeing the real numbers for what they mean and not what they're implied with the agencies that have been just trying to cash a check, so to speak. But really, it's a very secure position to come into the conversation with, and I'm sure you feel that when you do that with your clients, from the way you approach data, is the same thing. It's like, look, we're going to show you the numbers that mean something. We're going to show you the channels that need to be looked at, and this is the metrics that you need to identify, not the hypothetical numbers of engagements and not the hypotheticals of traffic volumes, but the actual tangible results from the engagements and so forth. So kudos for the fact that we actually meet somebody that is of a like mind, because all too often we're coming in cleaning behind those other agencies or those other functions where it's like, they told you what? They gave you what? You're sitting there going, I'm believing that somebody would actually believe the smoke and mirror stories on some of this stuff. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we definitely take a more consultative approach to our engagements, because we're definitely not a retail agency in that sense. And so we, with a management consultant background, I like to bring a consultative approach through not only my interactions with the clients that we work with, but that flows down to our account team as well. So in the spirit of, we take a very educative process to our engagements, and we spend a lot of time bringing, those less digital savvy DOSMs up to speed with not only what are we doing, but what the trends are in the marketplace as well. And we find that, that really empowers the relationship when, our clients are also kind of up to a certain level and being able to handle conversations both with us and without us when they're out in the fields, when they're getting pitched these kind of things. If they're unsure, they'll typically, refer those conversations to us, and then we'll pick up and do the evaluation and due diligence. And, we absolutely, we're not a bot. We're just that consultative, that extension of their team. And, a lot of the times we try stuff out, but we have a lens on it that knows whether something's truly impacting KPIs or not. And then if it is, we'll keep it going, because we're marketers as well. So you do more of what's working and you do less of what's not, but you got to try something.
Right. What is I mean, I know you handle with independents, and that's your primary, which I agree with you completely. Independents are so much more, not just fun, but adaptive, usable, bringing to market. I don't think a lot of brand-owned properties realize the freedom that independent hotel life can give you when it comes to your ability to really put yourself into the market space without the brand saturation problems and dilution of product. What is your sweet spot? What kind of client is in your world optimum size-wise and so forth that you say, this is the place that we're really, that's our spot, that's our place we want to be?
Yeah, I think for us, it's definitely upper upscale independents, 4-5-star properties. But really, outside of that, as a categorization, it's somebody that knows that they don't know what they don't know, and they need the help, and they have really aggressive objectives from ownership or from the management companies that is looking for a relationship, and not something that is just, we're going to set it and forget it. We're not that. And that's okay. That works for some property types and for some ownership types and the dynamics that might exist there. But we really do our best work when it's a collaborative relationship, and they're open to ideas, and they're open to challenging us and us challenging them as well, because it works both ways.
When you talk to clients about what you're looking to do with them and what successes you, what kind of return on value are you talking to them? Mine is always an EBITDA line. I try to ask them, what is your EBITDA function right now? What percentage are you running your EBITDA line at? And that, to me, usually is a baseline I try to say that we want to target for, that says, if we're not able to hit that kind of number, we're actually kind of costing you money because you're not able to flow through past that point, we're actually taking away from your EBITDA. Is there markers or measurements that you hold up and say, hey, look, we're looking to maintain this type of relationship value for you for our efforts and stuff, or do you allow it to cultivate according to their KPIs and goals? How do you tackle that value proposition?
Depends. Yeah, we're definitely not at the EBITDA kind of lens with that. Some of the things that we do in terms of impacting direct distribution and moving that needle incrementally in the right way has certain KPIs that are very focused on return. But then we also have other aspects of our lines of service which are higher funnel, which don't have that return on ad spend that you're looking for, but it's filling the hopper at the top of the funnel, whether it be from a social perspective, etc. So it's very holistic in how we execute on our programs, and each of those stages have different KPIs. So it really depends on the objective, but we don't really have a single overarching statement to say that we're going to impact EBITDA or anything like that.
I actually have to call out the gorilla in the room. For me, in my mind, for some reason, you are just absolutely reminding me of that dude that runs the Late Late Show that does the car karaoke. You look like him. You sound like him.
James Corden?
Dude, you are like, I'm listening to you and I'm like, I'm waiting for you to bust out in a song. I'm sorry. You have the look. You look like him.
I'm not even going to attempt it.
Are you talking Tony Award winner? Academy Award nominee.
I'm sorry. I
gotta say.
Because I'm looking at it, it's like, golly, it's stuck in my head watching you on this. I don't mean to take away from the points being made. It just said that it's like, oh man. So from now, taking the balance between OTAs and so forth, how, when you're starting to have the harder conversations client-wise, when you're talking about channel reshift, distribution and shifting channel and so forth, and they're understanding what you're talking about, how do you tackle the OTA shifts, and how do you tackle other channels, GDS? I mean, how do you begin to chip away at the metrics on some of those things?
I mean, definitely the first thing we do is look at the landscape that we have in play. And, when I first started the company, my mantra was direct is best, direct is what we're going to shift, etc. And we're going to do, we're trying to go overweight on getting direct, etc. And the more and more time you spend in the evolution of the digital landscape period, but then within travel and hospitality, the more you begin to realize that you're not going to ever get, north of 80 points on direct distribution. It's just not going to happen. So now we take a very more pragmatic approach and say, okay, it's the right blend. What is the right blend? What's the right composition for the distribution mix that we're going to try and attempt to help you achieve and get to, with a focus on, trying to incrementally increase direct distribution, but knowing that these other channels can also support in your ability to impact the direct distribution numbers if you utilize them correctly. And that's a very, very tight, close relationship with revenue management as well. That isn't something that marketing as a function is able to do on its own. So that conversation with revenue management for us for many years now has always been a very tight relationship that we've always tried to establish with revenue management, because we can drive as many people, as many qualified visitors into the booking engine, into the product pages, deliver whatever experiential marketing pieces that we want to get people bought in on the premise of, buying room at your property. But if we don't control pricing, and we don't control availability, and we don't control all of the other levers that, combined with the marketing function, enable a booking to happen or not. So that's a dynamic that has to exist for us, and that's where we really take that closer look at the distribution mix on an ongoing basis.
Sure.
And that is so critically important, because you wind up with these situations where you're like, hey, the campaign's not working. It's like, well, yeah, the rates are up 20%. What's going on? That's because of the large group platform or whatever happened. Yeah, the hotel next door burnt down.
Yeah,
whatever.
Walk-ins the next day or something, right? And so suddenly, and it's like, even just occupancy levels as well. If you're pacing at like 85, 90% occupancy for the upcoming month, we have to know that stuff because we have to adjust our strategies and plans to accommodate that, right? So, you know, and that's at a simple level, the types of things that could impact the return. And so, yeah, I mean, it's difficult to really kind of go into a month and say we're going to estimate, you know, paid search, mid, lower funnel, that we're going to get X in return if we can't actually sell product because you don't have it to sell.
Right. No, I mean, the reason why I was complaining about my crashing and burning on sleep is because with the HSMI's Rocket program, literally the program that we're running around for HSMI is the revenue management and digital marketing convergence. Just exactly what you said. Marketing can't run its own without revenue insight. Revenue can't facilitate what it wants to do without marketing's insight. And so knowing when to throttle back and downshift and change. I remember my earlier conversations when I started talking to some clients about the fact of, no, we really need to stop spending in your direct channel. And they're like, what? But I mean, we want to drive everything. It's like, no, right now, the demand in your market and the rates that you have to offer, OTAs is your best platform for cost effectiveness because they're putting you in a space that you can't afford to be in. And you should not be trying to just transition that into your direct channel because you're shoving 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound hole here. It's just, you're pointing it in the wrong direction. You're spending money that you don't need to spend on market that you're not going to be able to attain. And knowing, like you said, that nice mix of knowing when to downshift and when to accelerate and move to what channel has your best optimum opportunity based on the market is a lesson to be learned out of the revenue.
And it's like a good blend. It's different for everybody. It tastes different to everybody else. And like you said, market types, product segment, et cetera, all of those go into what the right combination of flavors is going to be for a particular property in a particular market, and et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, there is no holy grail. There isn't.
Right. The only argument that I'll hold on to our OTA engagements and conversation is the first acquisition is always great from an OTA, but to have to use the OTA again for second acquisition of the same guest, it's to me a fall down of the property at that point, because then they weren't able to translate the conversation from the OTA engagement, which brought them there, to the direct channel opportunity for the personalization of the experience for people.
Maybe. And Lauren, I generally agree with you on that.
Generally. We wouldn't be a show without one of us going, wait a minute, I'm confident on that one.
and again, very interesting conversation actually with a fellow from Hyatt and a fellow from Expedia, right? Simultaneously, right? We're sitting down having this discussion. Because actually I walked up to them, they had actually been on stage together and we're talking about if you can share information, you know, appropriately and work together, you can use these channels more efficiently, right? As opposed to fighting with, and I was kind of joking with, oh my God, look at, they're getting along. Nobody thought this was possible. And they're joking, don't tell anybody, things like that. But, these guys were sitting down afterwards, just, kind of having a beer, and, I joined them. And that was kind of the discussion, because you wind up with these scenarios where it's really the individual preference of that consumer. And if they're booking their air or doing other things through Expedia, and it's easier for them, it's a better experience, and they don't want to go to the hotel's website, there's a portion of the market, right? And I think that's something that's not really understood, where that's just kind of the preferred channel. And as good as you may be, they don't want to do that. It's actually kind of a negative for the consumer. So that has to kind of get baked into how this understanding of how all this stuff works, right? And nobody has a good handle on that. Now, my argument would be Expedia probably has a better handle on that than the hotel groups do, right? With the vast amount of data they have going across brands and what they're looking at with, getting such a tremendous amount of volume from TripAdvisor. And I mean, they're able to look at a lot bigger swath than even a Marriott or a Hilton. But yeah, it is interesting. For that dimension. And you start seeing, I mean, one of the news topics was Priceline now has a deal with points.com. So you can start converting your airline miles more efficiently through Priceline. And so it has nothing to do, you see money coming in at your Priceline rate for whatever, right? And that's fine. Hey, Priceline's booking are going on, and all of a sudden those are frequent flyer things. What?
Oh, we should have warned Tom when we get going like this. It's just you get a word that everyone just start talking over. It works out well.
Yeah,
exactly. But what do you? I mean, I agree with you, Robert. There is a segment you were never going to get converted over. It's not 100% I'm always going to pull somebody out. I'm talking about the laziness. I'm talking about the laziness.
Oh, absolutely. Completely agree. Yeah.
So
yeah, you should do. My point is the hotel should be doing everything possible to win that person to their to their site directly, right? Do all the things that really make it a great value, or a high value experience, and great user experience. That's fantastic. But again, you aren't going to get 100% of those folks, right? You don't have the reach or necessarily the relevance or the contextual relevance at that point in time where it's just easier for them to go do something else. And
and I think you're right in terms of the repeat guest, and to Lauren's point a few minutes ago about paying an OTA the second time around for the same guest.
Oh yeah, that hurts.
From a digital perspective, the experience starts online, but it shouldn't end online. And the on-property experience is actually one of the critical components to also get right to ensure that the second time, the repeat guest comes back around, it is through a direct channel. And it's the simple things that people can start doing, if they're not ready, or maybe check in on and kind of score how well, front desk is at even getting those personal email addresses or just email addresses, period, etc., during the check-in process and whatnot. That's the easy first step and the first touch point that you can not only deliver an amazing experience, but also capture some of those additional data points for them to circle back into the direct marketing efforts that you would do, for the property. So,
yeah.
No, we do, with clients, we often talk about the front desk trying to build campaigns of conversion of leads, trying to get real email addresses and so forth. Just to share something I shared in the speaking is like a function that can work that has been successful is on most platforms, like the Travel Clicks of the world and so forth, that you can create these things, make a separate pre-arrival letter, because all of your OTAs through the channel Synexus or any of the other ones are coded correctly, or if you have them channel based, you have them channel identified, and send them a different pre-arrival to the made up email that you have that you get from the OTAs, and give them an incentive value for them to put in their real email address for whatever it is that you're offering to them, to try to create some conversion database from that. Where then just by saying, hey, Mr. Smith, we know you're arriving, pre-arrival, blah, hope you have this wonderful time. So this is the email we have on file for. If you like to give us your email, we can send you this so that you can have free whatever when you get here. And even any conversion of that is more than not having it from before. So
yeah, or even ask for a mobile number to text or things like that. I know certainly one group I've been working with has been doing that quite effectively because they have a mobile check-in, things like that, and they're working to really try to get things to actually transition to go open the door locks and things like that, right? Which is is interesting. And actually, it's interesting. Was talking with one group who's doing. I probably shouldn't say exactly who they are, but they're in the room access control business, right? And they are getting very aggressive.
Are you working with the CIA again? Are you working how to break code locks on doors again, Robert? Come on, man. Don't go government on us.
No, but just, hey, my government contract is over. It's done. Whoa, I'm free.
I'm working with an organization based out of Langley that I can't talk about, but we're doing this with the code locks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, although the NDA, I think, is forever.
Yeah, right. Or
there is no statute of limit. Yeah, there is no.
So what do you think is a good? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no. I was just going to say that these guys are really getting into the authentication process, right? As you as an individual, and they're trying to move up the funnel to start going. Okay, hey, if you want access to your lock, let's get this going through here. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we can authenticate you. And yeah, that should be the little piece of information that is going to give you access to your Netflix account or anything else that you want to do to interact with the hotel. All of a sudden, I mean, if these guys had their way, the door locking company is really going to be driving all the authentication for everything else, for everything going on in the property. And there may be an argument for that, right?
Well, I think the additional data is definitely going to be warranted in terms of the software, et cetera, and the way to get those additional kind of interest data points, et cetera, intraday and building profiles based off of that for more improved personalized marketing down the line, et cetera. It is, okay, you get to access your room, you need to have an account, you need to give us this information. Thank you very much. Boom. So now we have, those contact details, even if they weren't captured at front desk. But what's funny is, as we get further down, this decade in the Internet of Things, you're going to see a lot of consolidation on these on-property technologies. Yes. Towards the point of, okay, now there's one company, and I don't like to push product, but I can think of 2 or 3 on-property kind of experience, apps that exist, and there's some significant funding behind some of these apps. And the long-term roadmap for these guys is acquisition of some of these other companies that altogether complete the cycle on my entire on-property experience, from getting in the room through to leaving, and the post-CRM kind of experience that I have through the app, et cetera, et cetera. It's very fragmented right now, but you'll see some consolidation on that over the next 6-7 years.
Well, and Expedia specifically is very, very aware that they spend billions, right, on customer acquisition and converting it into hotels and all that, and then they completely lose contact with the traveler when they check in, and all of a sudden the hoteliers can do all sorts of stuff to engage them. And let me tell you, Expedia has a business model that strongly incents them, as we were saying, for that second and third booking, for them to have that preference to go back to Expedia as opposed to that.
Well,
and they've got 25%, or the majority investor, I believe now in Alice, or at least the lead investor. So
that's one of the investments I was thinking of, was their investment, their stake in Alice too. That's an interesting, and I think one of the movers and shakers is going to be those guys. And I think Alex has his head on the right way when it comes to, okay, long-term roadmap is, domination, right? I mean, it is, right. And you have deep pockets, and that's absolutely where to go. And you could argue, well, what is the roadmap for an OTA? Because it isn't what they are now. It wasn't what they were 5 years ago. What they're going to be in 5 years' time is going to shake the industry up a lot, and especially when it comes into the distribution mix and who owns the customer and who's delivering experiences.
Yep, very true. Alex has been on the show with us. We had some fun conversations with him about how he and they envisioned. We gave him a little bit of so you sold your soul to the devil to Expedia. He's like, no.
There's smart move by him.
Yeah, he did a really good job of framing that relationship. Because the first reaction we had is like, you had a great product, and now you sold it to the beast. And and he's like, no. Actually, it's a very collaborative vision, and we have a very clear path on how we can scale and build. So he and his team were exceptionally smart on how they frame that together. Yeah, most definitely. But to your point, yes, the integration of data in the long haul will be that aggregation of data. Expedia knows it, and so forth. And it's kind of weird because I have a mixed feeling about Expedia. And the time I'm thinking about this is like, they throw out these APIs and these hackathons, and they give great data output, and they give platforms to use to help you understand your revenue management, yield opportunities, and so forth. But they then, after the flurry, it kind of falls off, that the usability isn't there as much anymore, and they begin to shut these things back off again because they're just not getting the engagement of using the product that they're even offering for free. Do you have a thought as to why may it be the case? Is it a lack of trust? Is it a lack of usability, or a lack of understanding? I mean, how do you see that these things that the Expedias and the Bookings.com put out there for revenue yield and so forth just don't get that critical mass adoption that they I think we're hoping for, I guess?
I mean, from my perspective, I don't really have a true tell on that, not knowing what levels of adoption they actually have. But I think it just sounds like really expensive toe dipping, and it sounds good in a press release, right? But it's also a slight indicator into where they're going, which is what I take away from that kind of information more. But at the same time, they have their data sets, and that's what they're putting into these systems, but it's not as complete, as what a hotel has. That's right now anyway, that's here today, but, look out for the next, acquisition announcement, and you might find that there's some different future in that statement. So.
Yeah. What, just out of curiosity, what kind of softwares do you guys use for data analysis and so forth and crunching now? Do you stay in the Excel world? Do you start playing with Tableau? Do you start going MicroStrategy? What kind of stuff do you use to
It really depends. It's across the board. You know, if it's just, you know, specific kinds of projects that we're working on, we'll pull together a toolkit based on needs, even if it's short term, you know, software utilization. But we have our staples, you know, from Google Data Studio for anything in the Google kind of ecosystem, through to Excel, through to Google Sheets. You know, we have our own dashboarding and stuff for the output of that information, etc., for month-end reporting and whatnot. But yeah, I don't restrict our team on, no, you just got to use this. And, you know, so it really whatever is required for the objectives and to find and, you know, get conclusions from stuff is what we'll pull into the play.
Do you like
that's so odd? I just wanted to interject though. That's so odd because, you know, being British, I would have thought they would have done the same approach as Fuel, because I mean, you know, Stuart says how they love the high touch aspect of doing everything manually on paper, right, and not using any computers, and just kind of that sense of really working with. There's nothing like having data. He'll say as having the pencil, the graphite going onto the paper to really understand.
Well, Stuart's clearly accelerated beyond us. I still have our abacuses out on the tables that everybody.
Oh, well.
That's right. Yeah, it's nothing like a good abacus, I say.
But Lauren, you will never beat the accuracy of Lauren's Magic 8-Ball. I'm sorry, there's a mastery there where. Will this program work? Shake, shake. Highly unlikely. Oh no.
So, do you like clients that are wanting to be fully informed, that they want to see the Google Analytics raw, they want to see their custom, or do you like the ones that want a report overview that has red and green colors and arrows that go up and down? which do you like engaging more with?
We like them all, Lauren. We like them all.
Well said.
Very diplomatic. Very diplomatic.
I think that's the British politics coming out. I think the answer to that is we'll work with the dynamic and the type of relationship that a client wants to work on. So we can adapt to whatever we'll do. You know, we have some clients that are, hey, I need a month-end report. I just need something to send up to my GM, to ownership, etc. All the way through to, no, we're going to sit down for 2 hours in a month and rip into GA and, you know, really go deep on stuff. So it really depends on the nature of the client, what they want to do, how involved they want to be, and we'll work with anybody across that spectrum.
Awesome. Now, are you working with GTM shelling now, and because of all the coding tracking and everything else, and because I've always found it hard to educate clients on the understanding of the metrics associated with the things that can be tracked on a website now. I mean, they're understanding analytics in its general sense of, you know, basic raw number stuff, some semblance of, you know, source of data, some goal setting, some event driven stuff. They understand some of the concepts of it. But when you really start talking about the fact that I can track the dates that they're putting into the booking field, correlate that to their origin, look at their lead time from interest, and start showing, you know, start pivot. You can do it on pivot tables, but Tableau is even easier, and so is Micro, and start creating these correlations of lead times and channel costs, and, you know, so forth. Are you guys in that space with that, or are you pretty much keeping it where you run it, and it's always just the results driven that the client's looking for? Just any opinion about that kind of stuff?
No, we go to town on that stuff. We've been using Tag Management for a number of years now. We were one of the early adopters for Google Tag Manager as well. The custom dimensions and what we're capturing in the booking engine path, but also how we're tagging up client websites, etc., to garner far more information than we ever could, say, like 3-4 years ago. We're absolutely going to town on that stuff, because now it's information that we're bringing into our workflow internally, not having to wait for PACE reports, not having to wait for month end. You know, what's the point in looking back when really you should be looking forward 90 days and trying to impact that, right? It's useful, but it shouldn't be the conversation. So we're analyzing all of that, but then also comparing that with rev management data and Intel too. So we're blending it all together, and that really hones in what our 30, 60, 90-day strategies are for a client based on, all right, what do we actually need to impact?
Yeah. With the Google recent conference and so forth, first I would like, you look at Duplex, and which is mind-numbing, is to think that we're going to start talking to automation as if it's a real person, or automation talking to us if it's a real person. But what really got me, where I was totally stoked on, was their the tour, the 360 tour development you can do now, where before it had always been kind of a highly geeky thing to try to figure out, you know, from doing the connective 360 bubbles and so forth and so on. Now you can literally create your own tour and shove it up as a package for your own hotel. I mean, just was there anything out of the Google conference that you saw that? I mean, that's the thing that got me excited. Is like, because I'm one of those heavy 360 video, connect the dots kind of, you know, location based kind of stuff. Did you see anything out of the conference that was eye opening for you as to, you know, the fact that the schema and the snippets are opening up and that, you know, it's all going towards voice driven acquisition and so forth? Or what did you get out of the conference?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's more the voice aspect of it, and the capabilities, where they see that going, and then obviously for us is transposing that into how does that affect future strategies for us, and at what point does it become a viable potential marketing channel? What does that sound like? Not what does it look like, but what does it sound like, and what are the interaction types that are going to happen? I was doing a client conference. I think it was actually not this January, prior January 2017. And we brought a conversation about voice search and, you know, how good is it now? What's the status quo right now? But what are the potentials for it in the future? You know, and at the point I had Siri down and Alexa down as glorified egg timers at that point, right? Great to like, whatnot, but she makes a mean boiled egg. So, but you know, now with you know, the I/O event and everything that they're doing with voice, we're moving towards with their deployment of AI, we're moving towards a world where it becomes way more viable for some form of transactional event to happen via voice than it ever has been before. You know, the booking of you know, if they use the booking, the hair salon or whatever as the use case for the demo. And it's great, you know, obviously that's one, and I assume it was live. I watched the Verge's 14-minute recap of, you know, the entire event or whatnot.
That was great.
So I saw that one. And it really is an eye-opener, and it really could be, it's not necessarily going to be a game changer per se, but it's going to be another channel that from an agency perspective, we have to obviously understand what the capabilities are. But also just from a technology perspective and as a marketer, it's just fascinating to me to see where it could go and just to future vision some of this stuff and see if it actually pans out.
Yeah.
Well, and I certainly think a lot is going to have to go into what I'm calling VIO. I mean, there was SEO, right, for search engine optimization, but basically voice interface optimization, right, to structure the website so you can start getting the right data and, you know, how are these answers being produced? Because again, you look at Google, a lot of that stuff is being structured off of websites and things like that. For even things, you have a restaurant, you better make sure your operating hours are correct. You know, all your local marketing, all that stuff has to be tacked down incredibly, you know, be incredibly well structured. It has to be tested to make sure it works. So something that you did on your site didn't break it. Something they changed doesn't break it, because that's real business. All of a sudden you start, or even just actually this the Omni Hotel in Frisco, Texas, which is right where the, you know, Dallas Cowboys headquarters, things like are. People were having terrible times with Lyft and Uber because I don't think the drop-off point of their porte cochere was, you know, their address was around the corner or something. These people, their Uber drivers are driving around getting lost trying to find this large, you know, many 100-room hotel that does conference business and gets a lot of stuff in. So got to make sure all that stuff works.
50% of those drivers are just looking for the $5 cancellation fee at that point. But yes,
yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but no, it was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, just, you know, people go and since I wound up driving there myself, I thought, oh, that pin's on the wrong side. But those are the things, you know, the hoteliers have to get down into or their agencies, or they have to have somebody handling it who's making sure that stuff works properly. Because again, it's your overall guest experience, and people wind up getting pissed off and they're tired because their damn driver couldn't find the hotel.
Yeah. No, very true. Now, we get to pick on Ed because he's not here, but we will channel him a little bit. We've always had a persistent theme through our conversations on the show that do the block and tackle first, do the the basic stuff correct first before you start going off to the shiny object stuff. But with that in mind, I mean, are you guys messing in the world of bots and anything like that for customer engagement or anything? I mean, obviously you have advanced conversations and advanced clients so that they are doing all the basics with you already correctly. They are doing the substantive stuff correct, and they can venture into some of these new things. Are you meddling with any of that right now where you're looking at support or engagement through bots and things?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is, being an agency, part of our role is to keep our eyes open and play with stuff, and we like to take that to a different level and try and break stuff. So, if we can break it, that's not a good thing. But yeah, I mean, the AI piece with the bot aspect and interactions, it's a dangerous space in terms of the customer experience, especially in the shopping path. But even then, how far can the AI piece really pick up on what it is that you're trying to do beyond a transactional type of dialogue, right? So when we enter into concierge-related, potential utilization, etc., we really get into it's for that rollout. My kind of take on it right now is we're waiting to see some really good examples and demonstrations that it can work in 100% of what the dialogue might be with a potential guest before we put it into a website, before we put it into an app or anything like that. Because to your point, the potential for providing a less than amazing, a less than stellar experience via a digital tool, you need to consider carefully, because it's as important when you get to that piece as your engagement with somebody at front desk, somebody at concierge desk, whatever it is, as a real human being. The line is blurring between when it's okay to have a less than stellar experience with software than you would expect with a human being. So treading carefully in that realm.
Yep, no, very true, very true. And we've mentioned that a lot when we talk about these types of things. They're fun, they're interesting. It's great to be informed about their potential, but to not rely upon it. Because you made this statement very early on that there's no more the silver bullet aspect to this. There's no more one single solution fits all the problems. It's actually an aggregation of little bits and pieces. And there's still the mentality for some people, client base, that are like, if I do this one thing, then we're going to be back in business again. We're going to get that share back. We're going to get our voice back. We're going to get all that back. And it's like, no, those days are gone. Those silver bullet things are gone. It's the little things that count at this point to it, and so forth. Which kind of brings me to the next question about with SEO and its real value proposition. I mean, it's all over conversation now. I mean, it's been 5 years in the running that SEO is dead in the conversation, Twistrom. And then now all of a sudden we're talking about the fact that there's no such thing as search pages anymore. It's all AI driven. That it's so complex now as to the results driven usability that Google's having, that it's not a matter of structure and format. What do you think with SEO? What are the block and tackle, or what are the things you see are the real value propositions of SEO going forward?
The fundamentals remain. SEO over the years has definitely changed and evolved into SEO as a discipline for us now probably comprises of about 20 components. Back in the day, SEO, when I first got into it as an ex-marketer myself before founding this agency. When I was doing it, it was, keyword, saturation, penetration, levels of density, etc., were the de facto kind of approaches. And obviously, SERP reporting was global. What somebody saw, was what somebody saw down the road in the state across or whatever, etc. Nowadays, I mean, my kind of take on it personally is SERP reporting, I don't know. I think it's kind of had its day just because of the personalized approach that Google delivers results in its own right anyway. And then with that, though, the index still has to be fed something. So, whether it be voice results, whether it be from structured markup, etc., from schema and elements like that you can deploy as a tactic, and you should for local SEO and everything else. I don't see the fundamentals really ever disappearing in the terms of you still need to feed information into an index. Nowadays, Google is going to make its own assessments via AI on things, but they're also going to blend that with personalized history, with its knowledge of your utilization on Chrome, across your phone, cross-device usage, et cetera, location. All of these things will effectively put SERP reporting to bed pretty much soon, within the next kind of 12 months. So that's one aspect of it. But I think, it's always going to be a discipline, but it's always going to be evolving. And I think it's going to be evolving more rapidly than we've ever known it to, even though over the last decade, it's night and day in its own right. I think the speed of evolution for the discipline is going to increase.
Yeah, agree with you. And to your point, I think in 12 months from now, it's basically, I was having another conversation elsewhere, and it goes back to, it really has pushed us back to the guest engagement value, that it's not about working the system as it is having the relevant content. Because when the conversation actually started from the fact I was trying to explain attribution strings and showing how the refinement of your attribution string and understanding it has a high value potential. Is that good for you? There he is.
Hey, how's it going?
And I was showing them, I was trying to give them the example of where you can see the ad that was placed, you can see the social engagement that was created, and then when you go to the organic engagement, the direct on your channel, you may have a page that said 20 things to do in your location. But if you correlate that they looked at the paid ad for the Tulip Festival, they looked at the social engagement about the Tulip Festival, then the 1 out of 20 things where you're talking about the Tulip Festival was actually the organic value associated with that page. So to optimize that attribution string, take that content that is related to those ads and create a new content that's specific to it, so they don't have to discover the content within the sorting of all the other stuff, but instead you can highlight it in relationship to the attribution string that it was already contributing to. So that's, I think, some of the conversations about the SEO that's coming into play now, is that it's more about the substantive content value to the guest experience than it is about the, I have saturation of content, so I'm going to get organically indexed better for it from Google. Those conversations are waning. So
the key is to have the content and then to have it structured properly so Google can interpret it properly, right? I mean, the way that you really want to have it structured, it doesn't, I mean, it's kind of that thing where if it's misinterpreted, it's wasted, right? And you go, hey, we have this great stuff, and if you aren't using the right schemas and things like that, and you aren't getting it for something that, for local events or things that you're tying into that they're deeming very valuable, and this is really important, and consumers love this, give yourself a chance to get some business is basically the bottom line.
The fundamentals are absolutely still extremely important, right? And they're growing into the off-page kind of signals that you're chasing as well. Yeah. But I think it's finally a time where you can call it organic search and really mean that it's organic, how that gets coming in, right? And I think, how it's changed is that before you could really just define what your property was to the search engines, and you were in control of what the message was. Nowadays, it's the search engines with their algorithms they're putting together. They want to figure out what their authentic guest experience is, right?
Right. Yep.
And then that's not just the fundamentals anymore. It's going off page. It's figuring all that out. It's harnessing the right conversation with the right content, the right SEO fundamentals. I mean, there's so much to it, but it's finally an organic kind of way that you can interact with your guests, which is really a win-win, right? There's a lot that you can learn from that, a lot that you can then repurpose onto your website. Make sure that if you're running a sentiment analysis out there, you have the right verbiage that they're looking for on your website. It's gotten rid of a lot of the subjective that you had back in the day, right?
You brought up an excellent point that most people don't even know what it is when you talk about sentiment.
Sure.
Conversation just... when I first started even talking about that, I would get the three-headed look, like, what do you, they're looking at volume and engagement and interaction. It's like, but what kind are we dealing with? What is the sentiment of the engagement? I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is like a color to the black and white conversation of data that is being missed right now, is that sentiment value. I mean, I'm happy you said that.
It's a 3D picture that you can then bring to that data, right? And it's hard to figure out. There's still ways that we're trying to figure out, what is positive sentiment versus a negative sentiment. If it's cheap going to be a word that's bad. With a
sarcasm.
Right?
Yeah, sarcasm.
It's sarcasm, yeah. The bots have now picked up on sarcasm, yeah. I think
really love this hotel.
Can't tell you how happy I was for the cold shower, yeah. Oh, that's positive. Yeah, but that's
absolutely important. And there's so many ways that you can harness that, and it takes away a lot of the subjective that we've had as digital marketers for years, right? Your guests are out there, and they're telling you what they think. So give them what they want, not just what you think. Don't create a solution for a problem you think they might have. You know what their problems are. Find a solution for it. So it's two birds with one stone. You understand the true guest experience because you want to, but now also because you have to, because it's going to send the right signals to the search engines as well. they're almost picking up on the fact that you do have that understanding and the right kind of engagement.
Yeah, I'll have to give kudos to Ed. He changed the methodology for me that goes towards the sentiment conversation, where the post-stay survey, I was always a traditionalist with it and saying, okay, now that the person's left, let's ask what their experience was like. And of course, that came up a conversation on the show, I don't know, a couple of years back. And Ed says that's the worst thing you can do. And I disagreed with him, and we went back and forth. And he ended up being very right about this. That
don't say that. He might hear this.
Okay, I was right. He was wrong. He was the one I was thinking traditional. I was the one saying no, never do this. But anyway, so the idea of the last official engagement with your guest is asking for them to somehow kindle a negative context so that you can improve your business by saying, what can we do to improve, or what was wrong, or whatever, and instead nix that whole thing and try to engage them while they're with you, so that there's a recovery value to it. That if you can find out how their sentiment is while they're with you, about their experience with you, that you can react to rather than forensically go back to, then you can hopefully change their negativity, if there is one, into a positive while you still have the opportunity. So to nix the post-stay survey from that context, keep it as an in-house survey, and then the post is exactly what Flip 2 does. Share your experience with people, share what you're doing with people, and that's going to invoke the positive about it, because nobody wants to say, unless it was really, really bad, that there was a really bad choice that they made by going and staying with you, that they really want to show what I say, there's two travel trips you have, the one that you actually had and the one you tell people about. And unless it was such a horror story, you're usually trying to amp it up, that you don't talk about the taxi that smelled like, cheese and was sweaty because the air conditioner wasn't running. You don't mention that in the story unless it adds to the
grand post. I will definitely concur with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, to that end, that sentiment is such a critical aspect that if you can key in on that as soon as possible, and engage with it in a way that you can work with the guests, and it really keeps that engagement for the lifetime value very high. So yeah. Now you do realize that since Ed ducked this show, that you have to come back, because we need reinforcements to berate him on whatever he's doing. Because when Ed comes on the show, it's basically Ed's right and we have to prove him wrong.
Oh, game on! All right.
So we need reinforcements in that conversation context to it as well. And
again, Lauren, disproving Ed is proving Ed is wrong is a very simple task. He has very, very superficial premises, poorly supported, and it's a piece of cake.
Stuart also is never usually right, that they just pretty much off on law. Actually, Stuart, their podcast is fun. Did you guys ever think about doing podcasts or like the show or something like this? Because you guys are doing it right. From everything we're talking about, you guys have the perspective, you have the engagement. I mean, you have invaluable things to talk about in good ways.
Well, we appreciate that feedback. That's great. And absolutely, it's definitely been a conversation over here. We actually just expanded our office, and the hopes are at some point this year to get a little bit more into the AV or the podcast type of world. But
somebody's got to knock Stuart off.
But you have to have your own differentiator, though. You've got the brick wall. You can do it as like stand-up comedy, like improv or something like that.
Absolutely. I am game for that. Absolutely. Spotlight is all we need.
Yeah. So a hotel revenue manager, a director of sales and marketing, and an agency walk into a bar. Yes.
I don't get no respect.
No respect. But because we pick on Stuart now, because he has one, if not one of the best podcasts for hospitality.
Yeah.
Does a phenomenal job with it. I slowed my podcast down, because the live show is more of a time consumption than doing the podcast. So I do an intermittent podcast, but his is much more structured. They go from point to point to point, and he's doing a great job. And from really, I mean, I can see why Ed wanted us to be able to have you on the shows, because what you're saying and how you're doing it is the right way in our sense, and we were very sympathetic to what you're doing, because it is listening to the client. It is tailoring the services to the client's needs. It is identifying and working with them rather than shoving and selling. So kudos to that. And that's
when you need to, right? It's not just feeding the best ROAS at the end of the month. It looks pretty. It's saying this is not working, or we need to change the conversation here from what it's been in the past.
Yep.
Yeah.
very much to that end. I only wanted to bring this up is that we've been keeping you dialogued about your stuff for an hour and a half.
90 minutes. Yeah. Just under 90 minutes.
Basically, when we said, "Hey, can you be on the show for at least a half hour?" We lied.
I knew it would open up a bunch of rabbit holes, and it worked out perfect.
Well, and you notice they tag teamed it. So, yeah, he originally dropped off going, "I can't take any more of this. Here, you got to tag in.
Tag, you're it. Go in." No, I made the offer that they could bring reinforcements if they wanted to. And again, we sincerely, we would love it. You have a standing invite anytime you would like to join the show. We would be more than happy to have you onto the show with it. I think, I feel bad that, Ed, I really honestly didn't know Ed wasn't going to show up today because you had asked us, because I wanted to like tackle him on some stuff with you because you know him well. And, Stuart, of course, as well, too. So I gave them text grief while we were on talking as to what's up with the no-show, buddy. But I'm sure they had something interesting, like boiling water or something to watch or something. But no, I would love to have it on the show where we can have them on it with it as well, because I think part of the missed conversation is what Ed is doing and how you're using him is similar to our conversations, and that whole engagement of the guest was a topic when we were talking about channels and so forth that is really undiscovered yet. It's a new way of perspective on the engagement. And I know from just some of the quick conversations we had before the show that you see it in that same light, that it's a matter of the guest engagement value proposition. It's knowing where they're going to do business with you, which is the channel discussion you want to have, and knowing what best to present in that channel. So would love for you to be able to make it back again as early as you can or whenever you can to do that with Stuart and with Ed and Tim Peter will be back from Amsterdam. So we can definitely have a very lively conversation with all of us on the same screen. So
sorry, Laura, did you just say you're flying us to Amsterdam for the next show?
Yay! Did I mention that?
No. He mentioned Tim Peter was doing that. Tim, for all of our guests, as lovely parting gifts, provides them with trips to wherever they would like to go first class. He's
Oslo
such a great guy. Even if he's not on the show, he's such a great guy.
So I got a totally unrelated thing to this, Griffin. It's like, okay, so I just finished traveling through California, Oregon, Washington, and they all have legalized marijuana. And it is such
I knew that was coming when I heard Amsterdam and Denver.
Because we're walking around going, man, that smells like pot. And sure enough, we're watching people roll and smoke. And we're like, it's just so alien for us. Because coming from Florida, we're still wound tight. It's like, no, you can't do that stuff. And over there, saying you are like the capital of the starting of all this, okay? You are living at ground zero.
And a lot of it's come down to a fiscal conversation way more than I ever knew it would be. But I think a lot of people, seeing how well Colorado's done, they've been like, I've rethought my take on that. It's not that bad. The day.
It's not that bad. Yeah, then the tax revenue certainly is not hurting anybody on that one.
Well, now just wait.
Back our first year, the state made so much money that every citizen got like $15 back in their taxes.
Good God!
It's
just wait.
I mean, I'm so
now
happy
there's
about
legalized sports betting in all the states.
We legalized sports.
New revenue stream. So.
We'll have a call after this.
What is it? It's a cash grab fire sale in our country right now. You can do whatever the hell you want. What the hell? We're good at it.
Right. Absolutely. I'll tell you, as a business, though, it's done incredibly well out here. A lot of the money goes back to our roads and to our after school programs. It's been fantastic.
That is awesome, because why not? I mean, it's such a common sense thing. You understand what they did.
So, it didn't change anything.
No.
It's always been.
Hey, did you get the list from Robert on the news topics and stuff that we had?
We have some amazing. We do have some amazingly great news topics. So
I didn't.
No, Robert, did you not send him the list?
I did. It probably got copied in there somewhere. So it came in actually this morning. Probably came in this morning. But
throw them out there. We're spending a lot of our days kind of reading
up. Robert,
so I'll put it in here. The first one is SimilarWeb has and actually I'll post it here in the.
We can always talk GDPR or ADA if you guys are into that right now.
Yeah, GDPR.
Actually,
I'm not playing that trick on you guys.
No, we prefer actually blockchain, and we wait for Ed to be participating in those. So, yeah.
Crypto was the other one. Yeah. In all honesty, all three very, very fascinating. What's going on right now?
Let me tell you this.
Talk about rabbit holes. Yeah.
Right. This conference
I'm still just on the sidebar with the GDPR. When I bring it up, I'm still amazed that people don't know what it is. I'm like, guys, you do know this is going to affect your market, right?
Yeah, you got a week. You got a week.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and it is. I mean, the GDPR issue is just getting crazy because so many lawyers. Well, and we talked about it on the show last week. Or no, I'm sorry. It was on an HSMAI marketing advisory board call where people were talking about it. Some of the lawyers are just like, ignore it. Limited risk. It's Europe. We're low profile. Just we aren't doing anything, right? They aren't going to enforce it. Done, which is a really stupid approach. But I mean, their legal counsel are doing. Other ones are going full bore. Do everything, notify everybody that you have, and they're knocking scads of people off of their contact, just completely unnecessarily and just gutting their list. A third group is just like, shut it down. Just don't do it. We don't know about, and it's like, oh my God, between the three of them, there's a lot of crazy friction in the area. But the SimilarWeb did their little annual workup of travel website stats, and boy, it is fascinating. Airbnb, this is, and actually there's a little summary that T-News did as well, but boy, over last year Airbnb managed to pass Booking.com in traffic, ending the year with 5% more visits to the site. So Airbnb had 5% more traffic than Booking.com. Last year, they were 6% lower, which is just like, holy crap. But these SimilarWeb stats, when they start breaking these things out, I mean, it's amazing to drill down because they have certainly the traffic volumes, the shares, and they have conversion rate. And I haven't been able to drill into conversion rate, as well as the attribution of what's coming direct, what's referral, things like that. Actually, I think you made the comment before that getting above 85% organic search traffic, something, or over 80%, that's really rough, right? I mean, but Motel 6 has 85% of its traffic is organic. Oh no, I'm sorry, no, 50% of their 50% Motel 6 has 50% of Motel 6's traffic is organic, and 85% of that is branded, which is pretty amazing. So I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or if it's all those decades of Tom Bodett ads. But
do you guys mess with using Airbnb in your calculations of comp strategy? Like, do you go to AirDNA and look at your market presence of Airbnb, inventory similarities, and all that stuff? Do you guys mix with that, or do you look at it as just being an ancillary entity in your markets for some of your clients?
Both. I mean, they're definitely a player in there. I mean, the between Airbnb and between Google now ranking vacation rentals as well, they're looking for the same type of gas a lot of the time, and going for that leisure room night type of gas. So we definitely see them as competition, but at the same time, I like the Airbnb's playing nicely with the hotels. That letter that they sent out about a month and a half ago, and where they're putting that kind of commission model at, I think it's something, with the vacation rental properties that we have, could be more of a conversation down the line. It's having the understanding of who the true players are and if they're a fit or not, and how they're going to treat our partners. But so far, it's been really interesting to see what Airbnb's been doing.
Yeah, there was. I was at a conference. I think it was about 4 years ago now, and Airbnb was not fresh into the scene, but it started to really kind of dig its heels in certain places. And so this is 4 years back, and the moderator asked a question of the floor, which was, and this is a hoteliers conference, right? So everybody in the room, marketing function, the general management function, ownership, management companies, etc. And the question was asked, who sees, hands up if you see Airbnb as a threat? And out of, I think, 170, 180 people, myself and Greg Oates, now at Skift, were the only two people that threw their hands up. Vision that these guys get into this space. Not only is it a competitive threat now, but it potentially, and now with the rollout as a distribution channel as well. It was kind of interesting the lack of foresight within the room at the time, that they didn't see it as a force in the economy within distribution. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. As how fast they've come is
the hotel
from an operational perspective.
The hotel industry has a 4-step process for dealing with disruption. They have done this since the beginning. Step 1 is to ignore it. Right? So they just don't look at it. Step 2, once they are told, hey, this is something you should really look at, they continue to ignore it. Step 3 is they panic. And then step 4 is they complain about it because now it's too late and it's already happened. Right. I mean, and it happens over and over and over. Here, the dominance of Airbnb. I mean, another similar web stat here. Now, I'm not saying one is causal to the other or anything like that. These are just, kind of the stats in the report, and I'd love to get into their data to dig into it and see what's really happening at a little bit deeper level. But they put a quote in the study. Even as the top hotel chains are trying to increase the volume of direct bookings they process through their sites, traffic to each of the top 3 dipped by between 5 and 10% over the previous year, right? And you look at that and go, oh, dear, that's not good, right? So, that's Marriott, Hilton, and IHG both down, with total traffic 5 to 10%. And then you're looking at Airbnb, Airbnb is doing 42.4 million average monthly unique visitors, right? That's the monthly unique visitors. Now, TripAdvisor's about double that, right? It's 94 million. Expedia's in there at 51.7. And again, this is U.S. only, right? Not globally. Globally, you see certainly, Booking.com, much, much larger. But if you go down through these top 10 OTA and meta search sites, it's TripAdvisor #1 at 94 million, Expedia at about 52 million, Airbnb at 42, Booking at about 40, Hotels.com at 27.5, Kayak at 27, Priceline at 26. Okay, those are pretty big numbers, but you go, okay, well, that makes sense. Marriott is at 26. Hilton's at 18, IHG's at 12, right? I mean, these are pretty interesting numbers in terms of overall impact. And
I want to interrupt on one thing, just while I'm thinking of it before I forget about this. Going back to our channel conversation, Griffin, what are you guys doing when it comes to meta search? TripAdvisor, we think, is shooting himself in the head. But and do you think Hotel Finder is going to go into the AdWords program? But what are you guys handling meta search? I'm sorry, there's a channel question, and you inspired it, Robert. Sorry.
Go ahead.
How are you guys handling with meta search? What are you looking at? Future use, current use? How are you guys handling the meta search answers?
Absolutely. No, it's a great question. I think we're definitely always relooking into the different channels and how they're each working. I think there is an interesting conversation around TripAdvisor right now. Google is hands down, like Google Hotel Finder is hands down the most success that we'll have. But, as we'll say, it's always going to vary from market to market and property to property and what's going to be the most successful strategy and channel. But we want to be honest in that conversation. It kind of brings us back to channel distribution and percentage of commission and lifetime value of a guest as well. Is sometimes if we're going out there and we're going up against Booking.com and they have these massive budgets to spend, and we find these bids going up pretty high, and we find that the media that we're putting to get that booking is similar to what it would be to let Booking.com just handle it with their own budget. We have to have an honest conversation at that point of, is this channel the best use of your dollar at this point? Yes, there's lifetime value they're going to get, but if you're doing it right, like we were talking about before, let Booking.com take that booking right now and you upsell them and get them to book direct the next go around. And that's a lot of on-property kind of conversation that you need to have. Another aspect would be rate being out of parity. If that's happening and we're bringing people the booking engine and just throwing money at the wall, it's not worth it. But yeah, TripAdvisor's definitely trying to make some moves, and we're keeping a keen eye on it. Right now, though, I mean, Booking.com is owning metasearch and that channel, and across the board. But I do have to reiterate, it definitely varies from market to market and property to property.
Sure. Well, and the reason, I mean, Booking.com's deal with TripAdvisor was very aggressive, and they were in their first. And my understanding is, they aren't paying nearly the amount that most anybody else is. But again, they brought in, what was it, 250,000 properties that TripAdvisor had no opportunity to put into their instant booking product, right? So yeah, they've done it. But even if you look at the hotels, I mean, it's fascinating, and I highly recommend taking a look at this SimilarWeb study. They're doing referrals from TripAdvisor just into Marriott, Hilton, and IHG, right? They're comparing TripAdvisor to Kayak, and for some reason, IHG is getting almost 35% of the traffic out of TripAdvisor, right? At least in terms of a share of what's going to those three. Out of Kayak, they're getting 2%. And the big difference, Marriott is doing 55% from TripAdvisor, 48% from Kayak. So, Marriott's dominating in both of them, getting huge shares of it. But Hilton, out of TripAdvisor, is only getting about less than 10% of what's going to those three companies, where they're getting almost half of what they're doing out of Kayak. So really interesting in terms of, I'm not sure if these are intentional strategies or this is just kind of happening. Really, really crazy stuff that you would not think would be happening.
I got asked at the presentation in Vancouver I was doing, they said, so what do you think TripAdvisor is doing? Do you think somebody's going to buy TripAdvisor? And if so, how soon? I said, it's going to get bought in 12 to 18 months. It just can't be what they're doing. Is not a monetization model in some capacity.
Up until this past week, and I didn't throw it into the news things, but their share price is up because they came out with some new forecasts. They doubled their tours and activities forecast, and Wall Street blew them a kiss. So
that's going to fall flat, just like they did last summer when they rolled out their whole. I mean, they have this little surge thing, and then it doesn't complete, or they give inaccurate numbers, and the thing falls to like a lead balloon. So
we'll see. They short up the carnage for a while on their share price. Now they have to produce. If they do start producing, and again, they own some interesting product. Viator and stuff. They got a lot of content, but who knows? We'll have to see if they can. Same thing. Yeah, can they monetize? Can they monetize those visitors? Because they've got a lot of them. That is what the street's looking at. And if they keep showing promise and boosting it up, I don't think they're going to get bought. But if they can't, the street will demand it. Yeah.
Do you guys mess with APIs and pulling data from sources and so forth to do some forecast or modeling or anything like that? Do you guys mess with any of that? Pull data off of.
Tom, do you want to on this aspect on the APIs?
Sure, yeah. Come around. Sorry. Multitasking.
It is. I was just asking about APIs and usability. Well, you guys messing with the APIs and pulling stuff like, hackathon stuff and things like that, or what?
Yeah, I mean, wherever we need to go into, and wherever we think that a data source in that type of format and real time kind of stream is useful, etc. We'll put our hands to whatever we think is relevant for a project or whatever the marketing objectives are. So yeah, I mean it's case by case, but yeah, we absolutely get into that world.
Because I was dabbling with it. I was complaining a couple shows back. There was a hackathon that Expedia had done in Europe about almost a year ago that was sharing airline lift and pricing, and I was using it as a modeling for the New York market for one of my clients, and one of the APIs went dark. And there was 5 APIs they had running, and I had one of them that went dark. So I made the foolish mistake of calling them up and going, "Hey, your flight prediction model API isn't working anymore. Can you turn it back on?" They're like, "What? Those are still open?" All of them went away. Note to self: never ask stupid questions.
Wait till it comes back up.
Right, wait till it comes back up. Just be quiet. Wait for it to come back. But no, I was just from the example of it's like API data pulls and stuff like that. I'm trying to find one for Airbnb because I think there is a lift correlation because we know that they're like the seasonal birds of Capistrano. You know, when event driven or business cycle begins to peak up, you start getting Airbnb inventory flux going up. And there's a lead time to that. I mean, I'm tapped into the community stuff and things like this, but I think there's a ability to pull data out of there that can give you some of that forecast capabilities of when you start seeing trend on that, correlate that to what you have as historicals and see if there's, you know, an early jump. I mean, with that airline data that I'm talking about, our comp set was laughing at us because we did rack way ahead of everybody else and held our ground and didn't dump rate in peak book window, and they were going to bottom, you know, dropping the rates and so we kept it rack. We sold out at rack and got it because we were lead up into it and sold up before the peak time. So the kind of data stuff works. It's just picking the right data, making the right correlations. So I didn't know if you guys knew anything about Airbnb's APIs or anything.
Interesting to see with Airbnb when you talk about pulling rates and what's going on there. I mean, you don't have a director of revenue on each apartment, right? So the seasonality doesn't really correlate as much as it does in some of the markets that it would with a hotel. But definitely got to keep a keen eye on what Airbnb is doing because they are a direct competitor. Depending on who the property is, these uber luxe properties are not going to have to worry as much. But depending on who the property is, like you definitely have to track what those rates are doing, and they're not playing the same game that a hotelier is. No,
they're completely on their own when it comes to it. But their communities, I'm finding out, are leads to that because they start creating this culture that the better at it or the more seasoned at it share the news with the new at it. You know, the ones that are just now putting their inventory onto market, and they start saying, hey, you might want to put your one room up. I mean, you like you said, you have to qualify the inventory that it's a isolated room, isolated product, multi-room product. You know, you just can't say it's a couch. You have to identify the inventory that you're comparing against. But once you do that and seeing when they start bringing inventory to market, that I just want to find a data source. I can't find a data source because there's no Airbnb's dark. There's nothing you can scrape off Airbnb.
That is what I've always said. Well, yeah, and AirDNA has some pretty good stuff, but do not bet against a company that has dynamic supply. I mean, that is a rough situation. Yeah, so
because they literally can build the extra room that they need. That's the thing, you know. Where hotels.
Yeah, if you find that API that can pull all those rates and let us know. But at this point, it's manual, old school, like how directors of revenue would go and count the cars at a comp's parking lot. It's kind of going around and trying to
AirDNA has a lot of that stuff, and I know certainly the Duettos and the Ideas and the Logic guys are they're pulling in all sorts of feeds, and I think in many cases they're still testing what works best to really kind of get in, and because it is a tricky situation of, if it was static supply, then you could start going, okay, here's how these things are. But again, individual units are different, and the locations and the size, it's rough. So
yeah. Hey, before we lose track of the rut row, we want to throw a rut row in, which is the one that Robert always finds that is one of those head slapping, what happened this week kind of stuff. What was the rut row this week, Mr. Robert?
Oh, you want to do the rut row? Well, this one, it actually wasn't from this week, but it was one that my closing panel at this conference was actually the rock stars of the future. So one of the things that I'm obliged to do under contract for this show is to mention the Cornell School of Hotel Administration.
It is a bingo card number. Yes, it is a bingo card number.
Certainly is.
You have to mention your history with Four Seasons as well in that process, but we'll just.
See, that's okay because I use Four Seasons as examples in this section at the conference, so I'm actually technically off the hook for but what these guys did, McKinsey went out. And this was published actually last November, but my section was we had 4 relatively recent grads from Cornell, and it was basically attracting and retaining top talent, right, is really obviously a very, very critical thing. And actually it was very interesting because since I was a graduate from school, we went through all of this, and through pure luck, the composition of them, these guys who were all born between 1987 and 1993, right? So they've been out of school for 3 to 8 years, sort of thing. These guys all went into school as undergrads. They graduated with undergraduate degrees. They all of them left the original company that hired them within 3 years, and 2 of them left within 2 years, which I thought was pretty stunning. And Mia's comparison, I spent 8 years with my first company, right? So that's kind of an interesting dimension. But this McKinsey study had some startling statistics. So one of them was that the percent. Okay, so this is a survey of Fortune 500 execs. It's not drilled into just hospitality or anything like that.
Okay.
But the question was, of these execs, how many of these execs would agree that their organizations recruit highly talented people? Anybody guess what that percentage might be? This is why
their mind very high.
Well, this is the rut-row category, just to kind of, the context is important, so I'll let you cheat a little bit on that understanding of where you should go. So it's going to be a tad lower than you guessed.
Okay.
Or you would normally be inclined to guess. Would you care to take another guess?
No. I'm going to sit off on the sideline on that one because I think it's going to go in a bad way if I keep going that direction.
18%. That means 82% of Fortune.
I wouldn't even come close to Price is Right there. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
82%. That means 82% of Fortune 500 execs don't believe their companies are recruiting highly talented people. This is not good.
Wow.
Okay, but they asked additional questions along that line. So let's keep it at the small number as opposed to the big number.
Yeah.
Okay, so the percentage of execs who agreed that they know who their high and low performers are. This is within their own company. 14%. That's not good.
What?
The percentage of
29 people. It's way better at that point.
And this is a good sample size of these guys too. And this is McKinsey. This isn't just we ran a Google forms
survey.
or a Google survey on LinkedIn or something like that. No, this is what percentage agree that they are retaining high performers? 7%.
My shot.
Well, it gets worse. You'll notice a trend. We started at 18 as a high end. We're working down. The percentage that believe they are developing people quickly and effectively, 3%. And
because we were all so honest.
Right.
Worst of all, who would agree that they are quickly removing low quality performers? Now, this may be good news for the people who are the real laggards and not doing well in their company. 3%. And you just look at those numbers and go, oh, dear God. Now, why is this important? Well, number one is there's going to be a talent shortage coming in 2020. And this is just in Europe and the US. There's going to be a shortfall of 16 to 18 million. Oh, actually, hang on. I want to make sure that I've got this right. Is this high performers?
Just so you know, Robert is always the accurate one when it comes to this. So we'll get the whole byline where the sourcing is before we.
So, okay, no. This is of high skilled workers. And in a second, I'll tell you why high skilled workers are important. There's going to be a shortfall, 16 to 18 million high-skilled workers by 2020, and that's just in Europe and the U.S., right? That's not globally. You have it also in China, India are getting hit too, but that's okay. So these guys are going to be scarce. The high-skilled workers are scarce, and these companies aren't good at even figuring out how they're attracting the good ones, right? Which that's bad. Now, why is this important? They did a great little analysis of the relationship between high performers and average performers versus the complexity of the job. So if you have a low complexity job, like for example, running this podcast, or something like
my
that,
perfect skill set.
but we consider Lauren a high performer. So Lauren is going to do 50% better than your average performer. If I was running this, I would be your average performer. Lauren is doing 50% better than I could, right? So that's good.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm feeling better.
There we go. Okay. So that's good. But if it's medium complexity, the high performer does 85% better. If it's a high complexity, they do 125% better, right? They're doing more than twice as good. But the point I made at this Onyx conference, because again, you start getting the payment processing, digital marketing, revenue management, this gets, I would argue, into very high complexity, right? I think everyone would agree that running a good digital agency, this is a pretty complex thing. You need some smart people. High performers perform 8 times better than average performers in a very highly complex environment. Wow. So obviously, okay, if that's the case, you've got to get these high performers. Hey, they're scarce, and most companies are really bad at either identifying them and hiring them, and even worse at retaining them. So that's the rut row for this week.
You guys
crap!
Those bots.
yeah, right. Maybe AI will say this. Hey, but I have to say, in Denver, I've noticed.
Well, and I would argue with the bots. The bots are going to start hitting the low complexity, medium complexity, high, and the very high complexity. You're going to need the people going, hey, here's how the bots. Let's refine these algorithms, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But to get you guys, Griffin, you've been in Denver. I have noticed a shift before. I mean, obviously, LA, that market, Silicon Valley, whatever, that's always been the mainstay. But Dallas is really hubbed out. Austin's really hubbed out. But Denver, man, you guys are coming up when it comes to tech and talent and market. I'm seeing and hearing more and more about Denver-based, Denver travel. And then there's a lot of people that are working for these other agencies in, for instance, LA, very expensive to acquire and retain. Silicon Valley, very expensive to acquire and retain. Austin has become that same way. It's very expensive to acquire and retain. Dallas has been a hotbed because it was more affordable to acquire and attain, but it's beginning to reach a point too. And now Denver, a lot of people that were working for Dallas offices that I'm aware of were Denver-based because it was an affordable resource pool, and you didn't have anything in market for them to work at. So they were a remote office connectivity. But now you guys are building up in Denver where there's a lot of shops in Denver now. And so there's a local resource to pull into. I mean, now you guys are going to be facing the same issues of, retainability, affordability. It's a wicked, vicious circle on that sense because you got to pay, to really get them in space and then get that talent that you're talking about for what Robert's referring to in the success. I mean, your guys' market's getting pretty heavy competitive, I imagine.
Oh yeah. Well, and even 5, 6, 8 years ago, I can't remember when Techstars really started up. Pretty big.
It was right around then.
Yeah, that incubator is really, I really attribute a lot of Denver success to them really kind of kicking the
Foundry Group. There's a lot of good VC movement out here in incubators.
So unabashedly,
a lot.
Unabashedly, what makes it? What keeps your retention? I mean, other than free breakfasts and wonderful outings and so forth, what is the reward factor for your team? That is, I mean, obviously, I think this just from the conversation we've had, the feeling of goodwill and success for having great relationships with clients is always an affirmation rather than the duck and dodge of bad client experience. But what else do you guys do to keep your people?
It's a great question. We did hit on that earlier about having the right type of client that you're not going to burn someone out. And that's definitely a very important aspect of every new property that we speak with. It's dynamic just as much as it is fit in other ways. But when it comes down to keeping people around long-term, it's culture. And it's not just a buzzword. It's not just having a ping pong table. I worked in enough startups where it was, you have unlimited vacation, but do you really want to take it? Like,
yeah, right. You want to be the guy that's always playing pool on the pool table rather than working.
Take that vacation. You're never taking that, but it's a great selling point for recruiters. Say we have a ping pong table, but do you really think you should be using that right now? So here it is. It's setting that up, and I can attribute this to Tom and Becky, who run the company, that they put that culture out there and make sure that it actually sticks. I know my first year here, just from my own experience, my first year, I've been in a bike accident, so I was at the doctor all the time. And Tom and Becky sat me down at the first year and said, "Hey, we're looking at your vacation time. It was all spent on doctor visits. That's not vacation." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but it happens. Whatever. Ready to move on." They go, "No, we we take this time, we budget this time so that people don't burn out, that they're here for a long term. So we're going to request that you take a few days off and just go somewhere and relax.
That's very cool.
You're driving us nuts. You're working too hard. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's an important aspect to keep in mind. Oh, hearing it.
I do not people doing this, by the way.
That's what I heard, and I went to Mexico for 3 weeks.
Exactly.
It's the part of it.
It's so cool. It's so cool they don't monitor performance or anything. You can just do whatever you want. Keep getting big raises. Yeah.
No hours being tracked, nothing. Like, honestly, come in, have a beer, play your ping pong.
Yeah.
There it is.
We're hiring.
Actually, I mean, are you guys always looking for talent? I mean, are you always on the biz cycle of growth, or are you pretty in a happy spot right now?
We'll always chat to someone. But being the model that we're in, you know, it's not a. It's growth comes when it comes, and we want to have the right people in place and be ahead of the curve there.
It's always an elastic band. You're either overcapped on resources or you're under resourced, and knowing when to add that extra resource is always a struggle when it comes to that. The reason why I'm asking, I'm being asked to be keynote over at the AHOA's youth conference at the end of High Tech, and they wanted it to be focused on what does leadership and technology do together in hospitality? Because hospitality, what's been made a point by Robert over and over, we do this denial. We have this slow adaptability. We're not known for our front edge approach to things. We're usually the last to be dragged to the well most of the time when it comes to progressiveness. So it's really hard to pull that new talent pool into hospitality from resources. But there's channels and avenues, and I wanted to get into the conversation on the keynote, talking about the fact that working in hospitality doesn't always necessarily mean standing at a front desk and or being in a corporate office of an ownership group. It means also working at very talented resources that are contributing to the success of hospitality as a resource of outside of it. But you're in hospitality. I don't for a minute think I'm not in hospitality just because I'm not running a hotel. Right. I'm full blown into hospitality because of the service. You guys do the same thing. You're in hospitality because you live the space. Robert, same thing, on and on. So to me, I want to add a little bit of what you're saying into the concept. Is like, look, culture is critical. The right client relationship is critical for people to want to be more than just a paycheck and a place to go. I mean, the fact that so that's what I was asking originally, is like for that. Plus also unabashedly, so for people watching the show, that if they're looking to live in Denver, be able to smoke pot at free will, play ping pong, drink beer, and have extended vacations.
Oh man!
But there is a place to go.
I believe that's part of the screening process. They come in, they have the candidate get really high, and then see if they can play ping pong. And if they can, that is the kind of high performer. Literally a high performer. No, they're looking literally for high performers.
That's right. That's a high performer. That's it. Literally, high performer. Taking that literal.
So, anyway,
is Tom making faces off the screen? He's like, no, don't say that.
Tom is like, why did we agree to do this?
For the rest of the
Never again.
Yeah.
No, but
hey,
being in a market like this, like Denver, that is growing at such a rate, and you have to be competitive with your perks. Even if you have them or not when people get in the office, like I realize with a lot, culture, eat strategy for breakfast type of thing is just the same. A lot of times it's just the same. So retaining of that talent is the next step, but bringing them in the door in the first place is really hard because what's the value prop that you have as the hotelier? You don't have the insurance that's fully paid for. It doesn't fit into the strategy there. It's opportunity for career growth. I think there's a lot of things that there are a lot of good value propositions of working in the hospitality space. But it's really competitive to have that be as attractive as a ping pong table, as silly as that is to say.
No, it's true. No, it's true. I mean, from a staff point of view, they want to be proud of the fact that one of their clients is that hotel right over there, that really nice place over there, or that's because it is a brag right. I mean, in a peer world, when they're out with their friends and so forth, they want to feel that they are in their own way happy with what they're doing, and that's a reflection with their friends and peers that they can say, I enjoy what I do, I enjoy where I'm doing it and who I'm doing it for, not, oh, you wouldn't believe the shit, this and that, and I got to do this, and we have these crappy ass clients that we're not doing. That's a self-destruct. I mean, they're literally on a self-destruct at that point. So yeah, the fact that you guys have that culture that it's not ping pong table based and free. How many free breakfasts can I get? But rather, are you doing what you do and enjoy what you're doing? So very cool for you guys.
We still have those perks. Like I said, to get your foot in the door with the right type of candidate, you have you have to have it. But that's not going to make culture. Sure. So it's really tough for the hoteliers though to compete with that type of perk that you're going up against. Hopefully, the good side of it is that they're finding the right people. Then the people that are hungry for that longer term kind of relationship with a company. I love seeing, working with Two Roads. There are numerous people that have been working with them for decades. It's a testament to who they are, but to the type of people that they found too. But it's more of a diamond in this type of market.
Do you play with Isaac Gersberg? Do you play with Isaac and Paulo Torchio,
Johnson? They're a great crew.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they are. They're a great crew. They're a lot of fun
by keeping that culture, but it's hard to find. It's a needle in a haystack in a market like this.
Very much so. Very much so.
Well, actually, let me just make a couple points because we were talking about this on that panel that I did. I'm going to try to find the link to the video because it was really good. But these guys were basically saying actually when you're hiring hospitality and all these four folks I was interviewing, I mean, they're interviewing people. One guy was with Aimbridge, right? And he's looking for folks to do feasibility work, things like that. Another guy's with Hilton. He's got a team of 46 revenue managers who works for him. He's looking for staff. Another guy had already done his own startup for revenue management, software company. They're all looking, but all of them are looking for people who have hospitality orientation and experience, operations experience, where they've worked in properties before. That it's so valuable to understand, again, the context and the relevancy of what these things, what has to happen at the property to have it go on, as opposed to somebody who's completely blind to it and just, they want to come in, they want to get a paycheck, they don't care or whatever, and they want to go, they aren't really invested in it. That was a surprising kind of huge issue that all of these guys kind of chorused on. Oh no, that's a major factor. One last thing out of the McKinsey report, which I thought was interesting, was they asked the percentage of employees who are satisfied when their companies deliver X, great rewards. So wages, benefits, perks, all the stuff we're talking about there. 76% of the people are satisfied if you've just got a great package there of things like that. Good stuff. 81% though are satisfied when their companies deliver a great job, right? It's interesting. They've got growth opportunities, advancement. They're making an impact. It's meaningful. So that's more important overall. They're more satisfied than just getting the rewards. 81% also are satisfied when they're working for a great company, right? It's got a great reputation, values, the culture. They're delivering results, but they're also contributing to society, right? So they want to work for a really good company so they can be proud of, telling their friends where they work. But number one on the list, these are the top four. Mm-hmm. Number one, great leadership. 89% said I'm satisfied. Maybe they don't have the greatest rewards package. Is it the greatest company? Well, it could be better. Greatest job, but boy, I'm working with an inspirational, supportive, this person's empowering me, focusing on development. There was one woman who left Sabre, and again, within 2 years of joining, and she wasn't recruited. She went after them because she had done an internship with Priceline. She knew she wanted to go into hospitality tech stuff, and Sabre was the place, and she hounded them until they hired her, sort of thing. Did really well in there, 18 months, 2 years, and they didn't have goals for her. She's doing a great job. They loved her, but she couldn't see any career progression or anything. And boom, popped out to this, basically a lock company, which would be a relatively non-traditional, transition. But this lock company is doing all this stuff for really starting to develop this authentication, engaging customer. How do they work with all these different systems in the ecosystem? Really much more interesting stuff that she characterized than Sabre was doing, which is like, hey, Sabre, wake up. You can't lose these high perform. And she is a high performer. She has been out of school like 2 years.
Anybody that has to work with large companies like Sabre, do you sometimes realize the machine is long to go eating up the talent? And it's really more process than it is personality at this point, because there's always frustration levels of job segmentation and so forth. But I just want to be mindful that we are literally 2 hours and 10 minutes into our conversation. And it has been awesome to think that we dragged you through that entire time without you like figuring you had to duck it. I think the tag team kind of helped. I do love the fact that your statement on the wall behind you, for the part that I can read, I already know what the whole thing of it is about how to handle the world. Like, you can't eat it.
Oh, man, yeah.
Yeah. So
for a dog that's another perk, though. Anyone who's looking for a dog-friendly office.
Oh, which is a key. I mean, actually, those are the things that make the difference. Before we went off all this, is like, so Griffin, first off, thank you so very much for being able to take the time, as well as Tom, and be on the show. I apologize that I apologize for Ed and Stuart. We ran out of time, that we couldn't bring them on the show as much as they wanted to be. We just refused to let them join. No, we have to have you come back when we can gather more of the team together, because I think we touched on some of these things like retention, acquisition of staff. I know that they have insights to it as well, and plus also the channel conversations, guest engagement. There's just a whole mess of stuff that you guys have such a great perspective on that I think you would really enjoy more than just Robert and I's voices, but Tim and so forth.
But again, Ed at Flip2 is going to say how useless his employees are. They're just, fresh horses, burn them out. Constant
culture is nothing more than what's in yogurt, and you can't bring yogurt because we don't have a refrigerator. All we have is a bench for you to sit on and do your work on a computer. That's all we want you to. Yeah, he's pretty driven. He has a whip. He kind of keeps scan cams on everybody, but looks at screen times, looks at time spent on screen, locks down Facebook so you can't see it. He's that kind of guy.
And I am on the record now. I do not approve of his employee chipping program. That is wrong.
Yes.
You do not.
I think that's way
invasion of privacy. Don't be that guy, please.
But that's the only way he can regulate bathroom time.
Right now, I think I was saying
the bathroom doesn't open unless the chip's allowed. So I mean,
and it does. I mean, and now that he's figured out the interface with the shock collar,
game over.
Game over. Yeah.
I'm seriously never missing one of these again.
So, Griffin, for those who want to know more about Screen Pilot and what you all do, and what website, what's the emails, what do you have on social? How can they reach out to you?
Sure, screenpilot.com. If you search at Screen Pilot on any social media channels, you can find us there. Griffin Sandberg, so gsandberg at screenpilot.com. Reach on out. I'd love to talk to anyone.
Awesome. Yeah. Mr. Robert, for those who want to know about Rock Cheetah, where can they find you, sir?
Hey, before I say, I just posted the link to the full, I think it was 45-minute session, so you can hear what the kids these days are talking about. But if you're looking for me, rockcheetah.com or on social media at Robert K. Cole.
Awesome. For archive of this show and all the other shows, the show notes, links, and everything else we didn't get to, and the topics that Robert was so generous in putting together that we didn't get to, will be at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live or /145, which is the number of the show. With that, gentlemen, I do want to make sure that we take the chance to say goodbye and thank you very, very much for the time spent. Please, Griffin, anytime you ever want to join the show, you have an open invitation. Anytime you want to come back on as feature, please just let us know when that opportunity comes up, and we'll throw you into the show mix. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you and Tom on the show and to get to know a lot more about Screen Pilot. Sincerely appreciate the time.
Absolutely. As we get more into AV this year, I'll remember not to wear a white shirt, but I do like the glow.
Thank you.
Yeah, see, Tom he came camera ready with the black shirt, all that sort of stuff. That's why he's the CEO. That is why that is the kind of leadership you're looking for.
That's right. I still think our original concept of spandex and half belly T-shirts with walking around with I think it was a mischance, a little branding there, but that's okay. We can work on that later.
Thank God.
Next time, I got it.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Lauren. I thought you were talking about you wearing that, and I just.
Well, I was gonna.
There, I heard that too.
I was gonna do the whole tight-fitting hospitality marketing half team, but they haven't come in an order yet. I ordered them. They're getting stitched.
And that's all. For the record, that's only Saturday and Sunday. Monday through Friday, Lauren is normal business attire.
Hey, I'm dressed in proper broadcast attire. What's above, it looks good. You don't know what's below, you know? All right, gentlemen, thank you again so very much. I appreciate the time and conversation. And we'll be on show number 146 next week. And in the meanwhile, Mr. Stewart and Mr. Ed, sorry again, we ran out of time. Couldn't have you on the show. We appreciate that. We'll talk later. Bye, everyone.